Well. Welcome back into the jungle. That is Mountaineer Report here on West Virginia Sports Now, available everywhere you get your podcasts, on YouTube and throughout the WVSN network. I'm Mike Asti. I will be joined by my new co-host Luke Blain here in a bit. We have a guest as well for this show, and the West Virginia Mountaineers continue on their season now into Big 12 play, coming off of an incredibly emotionally charged big win in the backyard brawl over Pitt. But can they bring the emotions down to actually win the games that matter? Because as much as everybody wants to say the brawl matters the most, and Rich Rod even said that, fact is, in this era of college football, it doesn't mean what it did when he coached the Mountaineers before. And conference play is what really, really matters to have a special year. So this game coming up arguably means even more. Again, WV Sports Now, Mountaineer Report. And I will now bring on Luke Blain and our guest for this show to preview the Mountaineers and the Jayhawks, Katie Maher of KCTV5. We had her on a couple shows last season, and welcome back, Katie. Now at a new station, actually. So welcome back. How has it been, the transition, as you're covering Kansas, but also the Chiefs, the Royals, everything down there?
Yeah, getting to stay covering KU and K-State has been super fun. Added Mizzou into the mix now, and we kind of just eat, sleep, and breathe the Chiefs, and for a few months of the year, Royals out here. So it's super fun, and football is always my favorite time of year. So
yeah, football's definitely in the air, and you Missouri and Kansas, you kind of had a meeting of both worlds recently.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing about this matchup. They're both coming off these rivalry games, so.
Right, yeah. The only difference is Kansas coming off the rivalry game, a loss, and then the bye, where the Mountaineers coming off of the win and then right into this thing. But yeah, that must have been interesting to cover kind of on both angles of things. But to jump into this matchup now, because we talked last year and how important it was for both teams, and West Virginia won that matchup. It's been close in recent years, but it's almost impossible for Kansas to take anything from that game for this game, because it's 80 new players, it's a whole new coaching staff, the system, everything else is different. So what kind of has been the conversation down there about what they expect from West Virginia? I guess we'll start there.
Yeah, I mean, they know that first conference game, you're going to be coming with a lot of energy no matter what, because it kind of just ups the intensity with how important winning your conference is nowadays. Because you win you can go 0-3 in non-con play, but you win the Big 12 and you're going to the college football playoff. So I think every team kind of comes into conference play at this point with a energized new mentality, and it's like we don't really care what happened in non-con play. A big issue for Kansas that they have been working on in the bye week is their run game. Their run game was atrocious against Mizzou, and that game really exposed a lot for them. And I think this is a very different Kansas team from last year for a lot of reasons. Because it's really all new starters. Like, you only have a few returning starters, and it's their quarterback, which is a great benefit. But really everyone else, their eligibility was exhausted after last year. Last year it did not go the way it was supposed to for the Kansas Jayhawks. They had basically all fifth-year veterans as the starters.
We'll get into that.
It was just not it. They just couldn't figure it out. They had an offensive coordinator that I think they had no business hiring in the first place as offensive coordinator, who kind of just didn't coach to Jalen Daniels, Devin Neal, and the rest of the guys' play style. Jalen Daniels was uncomfortable all year, and then they kind of start figuring it out a few games after when they played West Virginia last year. So that I remember last year, like that West Virginia game was like everyone in Lawrence and around every Jayhawk fan, the panic button was officially on, because it was like, why did we lose this game?
I remember going in, you said that it kind of was the season, that you win this, you can salvage it, but if you lose, that you expected the fan base to panic and probably the season go down the drain. That is exactly what ended up happening. And it's not like West Virginia's season got that much better. They ended up 6-7, lost the bowl game, and fired a coach. So that ended up kind of looking to be as bad as it was for Kansas. I do want to get to Luke in a minute, but Katie, was there anything? Were you at the press conference? Did you talk to with the
Not
coaches,
this week,
players?
no.
Not this week. Okay, because I did
No.
see some quotes from him about respect to Rich Rod, kind of talking about Rich Rod's legacy, etc.
Yeah.
Is there any different tone you're noticing for this matchup this year versus last year? Because again, this is Rich Rodriguez. This is a different Mountaineer team that did win last week, even though they had that loss to Ohio. So they're coming in riding high. Whereas you kind of even knew from afar, last year's West Virginia team, the vibes weren't great. The writing was kind of on the wall for Neil Brown. So they were facing a team that was almost going through the motions at that point. This is year one with a new staff and a pretty re-energized program. Is that at all different on the opposing side? Do you feel any different vibe at all from Kansas because of this difference now of this matchup?
I see some similarities in the way that last year these were two teams that were both desperate. They both came into that matchup desperate for a win. And this year, like you said, it's a new team, new coaching staff, new energized vibe. I think Kansas has a very new energized vibe. Like after they had that terrible run through non-conference play, they were just like, they would come into a post-game press conference and they were just defeated and like irritable, like for lack of a better word. Like they weren't, like, you almost felt bad asking them questions. And that's what it was like for half the season, the first half of the season, before they became like just play spoiler to all the ranked teams in the Big 12 for the final half. But like I have noticed such a new energy.
Might have lost Katie. Katie, you still with me? Yeah, well, I think we might have lost Katie, but I will say, Luke, that it is interesting to hear from an opposing side that the vibes maybe are different or that they're kind of re-energizing themselves. Because when you think about it, this is a Mountaineer team that's also desperate, even though they're early in their run and they're coming off a victory. We'll see if we can get Katie back here in a second. Oh, there we go.
Do you see me?
I
was here the whole time. I don't know why I went away.
You just froze. So we got Katie back. But I was just telling Luke that it is interesting to hear from an opposing side, knowing that the vibes are different, but yet both these two teams kind of are in a desperate mentality. And I don't think Mountaineer fans are as aware that Kansas maybe is dealing with a different vibe, that Kansas has so much of a different roster as well, because Daniels is still there, because it does feel like kind of the same cast of characters, or at least mentality-wise. I can tell you that the West Virginia pressers, it felt like a lot of, well, it's Daniels again. This is the same old story. You know what to do. You kind of know the offense. You know that style of quarterback. But it does sound like that's not exactly what's going on there.
Yeah, and I think for sure there, like I was saying before I got cut off, Lance Leipold just keeps saying how much he likes this group. Like he likes this. There's a new refresh energy. Like there aren't guys that were starters last year that are back now, other than Jalen Daniels and just a few, like I think one offensive lineman and Bryce Foster, and then I think like a few key guys on defense. For the most part, everyone is a new starter, and because of that, they don't really care what happened last year because they weren't the one that were really playing for most of it.
Sure.
So they just kind of come up with this new refreshed mindset, and like even after the loss to Mizzou, like they weren't defeated. Like they came in and they were like, we just lost to a really good team, and like they held their own with them. Like they were up 21-6 at the end of the first quarter. But it was a rivalry game, and like they had the whole, like the Mizzou, like the zoo was crazy environment for that.
Yeah.
Like those two teams hate each other. The fan bases hate each other. Okay. Goes back to the Civil War. So like even after that loss, like even though they coughed up a 21-6 lead, like they weren't like hanging their heads about it. And they were like, they know that, hey, we have a week now. We got a lot of weaknesses exposed. They worked on it, and they just have a good mindset going into Big 12 play, I think.
Katie Maher of KCTV5, Mountaineer Report here, West Virginia Sports Now. Luke Blain, Mike Asti. Find us everywhere you get your podcasts, of course, here throughout the WVSN network. Luke, do you have anything for Katie?
Yeah, I was wondering about it because it felt like Kansas, for the most part last year, had a lot of solid pieces put together, and it kind of felt like the piece that was missing was Jalen Daniels, and him finishing the year with 14 touchdowns and 12 picks. You were talking about the run game. Based on what you've seen from him this year, have you seen a level of play from him that's going to be able to elevate this Kansas roster if they can't get the run going on offense? So I guess, how have you seen him look this year compared to last year?
Yeah, he looks so comfortable this year is the best word to use. Because last year, even though it was like his fifth year playing, he was so uncomfortable all year because like the plays that were being, it was like everything felt like they were trying to make him a drop back quarterback, and he's not. He thrives when he can move around a little bit, put him in the RPO, let him use his legs a little bit. He's a great runner. Like, he is a dual threat quarterback, and he can also throw the ball really, really well. And he hasn't gotten a lot of credit for that, I think, in the past. But when you see the flashes, like, but I mean, last year it was a heartbreaking year because I truly thought that KU was capable of winning the Big 12 last year. And I think that K-State is going through kind of the same thing right now, where they are kind of like KU last year, where they have all these talented pieces and it's just not coming together. But that really was the case for KU. It was a roster chock full of talent, but the way the offense was being ran, it was just not meshing. There was a disconnect, and it was because Jalen Daniels wasn't being told to play the way that I feel he plays best. And this year, so for reference, basically what happened is Jim Zebrowski, longtime quarterbacks coach, has been with Lance Leipold for years. He's been with Jalen Daniels for the whole time that he's been there. Coach Zebrowski is a coach that players want to play for. Like, they love him. And last year, he was named co-offensive coordinator. Jeff Grimes gets brought in from Baylor as co-offensive coordinator, but he's the guy calling plays. So to start the season, Coach Z is up in the box. Grimes is on the field. Jalen's playing terribly. He's throwing interceptions. It's just not working out. About halfway through the season, about 4 games in, I want to say, they make the switch. Z's back on the field. Jalen starts playing better. And now Grimes is no longer here. He's in Wisconsin, and Coach Z got the full nod to be the offensive coordinator at Kansas, and now the offense is really rolling. And I've always been the biggest believer that Coach Z should have been the hire all along.
I remember that from last year, actually. I think they made that switch either after the West Virginia game or going into the West Virginia game.
I think it was after West Virginia.
Yeah, it might have been.
Because I think the first Big 12 loss was when it was like, something's got to change. Like, Jalen Daniels is not this type of player. But
I wonder if they would have made the change then if they would have beat West Virginia, because it took the Mountaineers to have a comeback late in the game. So maybe in a weird universe, the Mountaineers helped Kansas get on the right path. And
I think that if Coach Z was just named the OC all along, they would have had probably 9 wins last year at least. But that's my soapbox that I'll die on, and I'll never know the true answer. But
it is
when
Jalen
Daniels is comfortable, the whole offense is better. And we've seen that through the first few weeks.
Yeah, and prior to last year, he was a big reason why Kansas beat the Mountaineers several seasons ago. He's kind of been that driving force of the Jayhawks the last several years, kind of this emergence of a program that now has some expectations when maybe they didn't before. And last year was a very, very weird year for Kansas, to kind of further your point. If you look at any non-major polls, so if you look at the ESPN FPI, for example, last year Kansas was ranked top 30 in the ESPN FPI most of the year, but they finished 5-7. They weren't winning, but they were in those polls because those polls evaluate how you play regardless of the record. That's what they're trying to do. And as Luke brought up, they were playing well at times, and then Daniels would throw a costly pick, or Daniels would make a mistake. And it looked like Daniels was the problem when he actually is the best athlete on the team and has been so for years. So maybe that does lead into maybe it wasn't him. Maybe it was play calling, and now he's kind of back to what he should be. Luke Blain, Mike Asti here, Katie Maher of KCTV5 here as we're previewing the Mountaineers and Kansas Jayhawks. Both 2-1 teams, both coming off rivalry games. The Mountaineers off a win, Kansas off a loss, and a bye week. Do you feel like the bye week is any advantage at all for Kansas? It was kind of downplayed a little bit by Rich Rodriguez, but he did bring it up that, hey, they had a week to look at us while we were clearly in a slugfest in the backyard brawl.
I do. I think that Kansas planned their non-conference schedule really well, or I should just say first third of the season schedule
Yeah.
really well, because they honestly they started with not the easiest team on their schedule in Fresno State, and dominant win over them, and then game two, which was week one, was against Wagner. Like, I'm from the East Coast and I've never heard of Wagner, but apparently they're from Staten Island. um, Learned that for the
Yeah.
first time.
Yeah.
So they kind of got challenged a little bit week zero, and then got an even easier time to kind of, okay, we got challenged, but we overcame it pretty well. Like, let's see what we're made of and just kind of sling the ball all over the place. That's what they did week two. Backups got plenty, or week one, backups got plenty of time. And then because they got those first 2 weeks to build into it, ending with Mizzou and then having a bye week is like perfect scheduling. Like, I think other college football teams would probably look at that and be like, we're jealous that we don't have a bye week in between challenging non-con game, the start of conference play.
Right.
I think that's just fantastic scheduling on Kansas's part, however they got that schedule to be. I do think it's an advantage mainly because of the fact that they were shown these major weak points. The run game, offensive line is still a little bit of a question mark for me because it's 4 out of 5 new guys there starting. And then a few things on defense. So I think because, I mean, a lot of times when a team gets exposed like that, they have 5 days to figure it out. Kansas has, let me do math real quick, 13. So
I
think it's for sure an advantage.
The more time, the better. And by the way, I'm streaming this live here. So Jesse Braham says that you know your stuff. I don't know if you know.
Oh, thanks, Jesse.
Yeah. She says this woman knows her stuff. Katie, come back when we almost lost you earlier. So compliments to you. I thought maybe you knew her, but maybe it's just a fan here during the live stream that she is liking what you have to say. Luke, back to you. Anything else?
Yeah, I was thinking, like, this whole time I was kind of thinking about how, moving into conference play, you said the non-con isn't as important. I think looking at it right now, I think that game for WVU was so important to get that win in the backyard brawl, primarily from the fan perspective. I think that was like, I think the amount of fans the amount of wins that it would have taken to get most of the fans back on the train and back on the Rich Rod train, if they would have lost to Pitt at home after dropping that game against OU, that would have been, it would have just been a look forward to men's basketball season for
100%. I just mean that if you win the brawl and then you just go in the toilet in Big 12 play, fans maybe will be fine in year one, and they would rather that than lose the brawl. But that wouldn't really be a successful year in really any other standpoint. But yes, the emotions of the game, the fact that he hadn't played them since 2007, we knew what happened then. It was a must win for Rich Rod. But to Katie's point too, Kansas now has 2 weeks to prepare for West Virginia, whereas the Mountaineers have to come back off this emotional high. The whole roster said it was the craziest environment they've ever been in. And to go into conference play, it almost feels like another trap game is staring them in the face, and they didn't do that well in the trap game before the brawl against Ohio. Now, Katie, you did mention that they have to get the run game going again in Kansas, but that could actually be a tough challenge against West Virginia, because the Mountaineers, even in the game they lost to Ohio, their defense has been stellar, to say the least. They actually had the Big 12 defensive line of the week in the brawl. They've been able to stop the run most of these weeks so far this year. The secondary looks even better than last year. And if you remember last year, the secondary for West Virginia was one of the worst in the country. But this year, it looks even better. They play more physical. Zach Alley, who they got from Oklahoma, has that physical mentality, and they do bring the heat a lot. I would be surprised if the run game is what derails the Mountaineers, and the run game for Kansas can run all over the West Virginia Mountaineers. Maybe Daniels will, but I'd be shocked if it's just running back on West Virginia's defense. Do you think Kansas can find a way to win a game against the defense that is so sound against the run, and also now has back-to-back weeks having played against mobile quarterbacks in Parker Navarro and Eli Holstein? And even though Parker Navarro won, they had success against both. They both had really bad days against the West Virginia defense. So as much as I do kind of think, I'll tip my hand, I do kind of think Kansas is going to win this. I think they're a better team. it does feel like West Virginia's defense is kind of built to stop Daniels and the Kansas offense as well.
Yeah, I think that Kansas wins this game through the air.
Okay.
And a really bright spot that was shown in the Mizzou game was new star tight end Deshaun Hanukkah. He's a Kansas native. He's from Topeka, and he transferred to Kansas a little over a year ago. Tore his Achilles last year, so was out the entire season. He has come in, and there was a question mark of who's going to be. Jared Casey's gone. Who's going to be your new tight end that Jalen Daniels can go to. Deshaun Hanukkah had 2 touchdowns against Mizzou. He had 1 against Wagner. I used to cover, my last market was in Topeka. I know a lot about the way he played in high school, like the kid's a beast. Him and Jalen Daniels have been forming a really solid connection, leading receiver in the Mizzou game.
Okay.
I think that they win that through that connection, but also with Emmanuel Henderson and Cam Pickett, they both 2 receivers that have both shown a lot of good flashes in the first few weeks. I don't think that this is the week that, I don't think Kansas, they had 13 days to figure out the run game. I don't think that's possible in 13 games or 13 days. I think it can be improved for sure. But I think we all also knew that the run game was going to take a little bit of a step back this year because they lost a future Kansas Hall of Famer in Devin Neal to the NFL and just exhaustion of eligibility.
Yeah.
So Daniel Highshaw, when he gets going, he is a fun athlete to watch. I'm excited to see him start to do that because he's been running back 2 for a long time behind Devin Neal. And when he has been put in, he just at least once a game has some type of play that gets everyone so hyped. And he kind of reminds me a little bit of Isaiah Pacheco in some ways, to put an NFL spin on it. When he gets going, it's exciting to watch. And it's funny that the Chiefs are also incapable of having a run game right now as I compare this. But this is year 1 with Daniel Highshaw Jr. as the running back at Kansas. I think he's got ways to go, but I think he can figure it out. I just don't think that it happens magically in less than 2 weeks. But I think that Kansas wins this through the air because Jalen Daniels, he's got an arm, and when he gets to, be a little mobile, move in and out of the pocket, he plays so well. And I think this is the year that people actually realize that about him.
Well, I think they realized that a couple years ago, and then last year that kind of faded away. So maybe
he's been plagued by injuries for sure. And then
that's true. That's true. And there always were the rumors that he was going to transfer, and USC dangled out there, but he stayed true to Rock Chalk and still at Kansas.
You're bringing back trauma just thinking about the USC transfer rumor.
I'm sure that was rough to cover. Yes, we've dealt with our own random drama that fans try to cook up. Yeah, and that was brought up a little, not the USC thing, but the fact that Daniels can throw so well was brought up by the Mountaineers this week. That is something that differentiates him from just other mobile quarterbacks. This is not like a guy that just is going to get outside, try to scramble, and have 200 yards on the ground and maybe 100 through the air. He can do it with his arm. And there's even times where he starts scrambling, he'll get a few yards, and then all of a sudden he'll find somebody open and then he'll throw it. Whereas most mobile quarterbacks just stay running. So he kind of has that extra dimension. He does have the ability, it feels like, to be Big 12 Player of the Year for Kansas to win the conference. Do they put it together this year and actually get that done? And we'll see, I guess, against the Mountaineers, because it feels like that potential, every year we talk to you, the potential is they could do this. The vibes are this. The expectations are this. They should do this. And then it doesn't end up coming to fruition.
And that's college football for you, because literally, last year, I was the biggest believer that K-State was going to win the Big 12 this year. And now they're not figuring it out. So that's just college football for you.
That's very, very true. Very, very true. Luke?
Yeah, I think looking at this matchup, it is kind of interesting how in such a similar position both of these teams are in terms of, coming in from last year. You kind of had a mobile quarterback who was trying to be shoehorned into a pocket passer. That is the exact same kind of scenario that WVU was in. And now WVU, I think right now the problem is they have to solidify their style of play. And they have to solidify who's going to be taking the freaking snap, because, they can't keep doing the quarterback by committee here. So I think that thinking about what could go wrong for WVU? I think the main thing that could go wrong is what went wrong against Pitt, which is trying to shake up the lineup too much. I say, I mean, WVU had the lead at half. I think that game is a 2 or 3 score win for WVU if they just leave Nico in there. And, so you can't just,
Yeah.
you can't be messing up with the team's tempo like that, putting in the freshman quarterback and then Henderson. It's just that's a problem. And that is not a problem you want to have going on the road into the opening game of Big 12 play. And I think, offensive rhythm is very important in this game, especially in a high tempo offense like Rich Rod's. And now they're going to have to find a way to solidify it. But if Nico, I mean, if you only have 7 points at the end of the first half, I say let Nico keep playing and try to play through it, because it was very close to being a disaster against Pitt, and that's just a fact, But
No, I hear you.
it,
I hear you. I'm with you.
I know.
And
I
Luke
know
can
we agreed
attest to
on
this.
that in the press box.
But Katie, I even tried to ask Rich Rod, maybe, why the quarterback shakeup. I know you said you were going to do it, but you were leading. Why the freshman over the Power 4 transfer? Why did he come in first? And the answer I got from, the future Hall of Fame coach was because I am the head coach. So, okay. So
He threatened to put Mike in at quarterback.
He actually threatened for me to play. He actually said, because I'm the coach, and I said, can you maybe elaborate on that? And he said, no, I'll put you in a quarterback if I would like. So I could go out there. He'll fly me down, and I
in, coach.
Yeah, put me in. I said, that might not be a good idea, but the other quarterback we put in.
It could be an easy win for Kansas.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about 2 interceptions that both ended up being Pitt scores. Or actually were both field goals, not touchdowns. So I could have maybe done that. I could walk in and throw an interception. But yeah, he wanted to put me in. Luke Blain here, Katie Maher of KCTV5, Mike Asti or Mountaineer Report, previewing the Mountaineers and Kansas Jayhawks. We're going to get Katie out of here soon, but I do want to ask you something that Luke brought up there. I don't know if you did mention you watch a little bit of the brawl, and I'm probably have seen some viral clips or even the McAfee show. Did you hear anything about how Pitt schemed against that, or what Rich Rod's accusing Pitt of? Because a lot of players for Pitt fell down during the game. They had a lot of injuries. They had a rash of injuries, and Rich Rod basically is accusing them of doing a tactic and flopping to try to stop the high-tempo offense of the Mountaineers. So the question
is, the first time.
It wouldn't be the first time that a team's tried that. Honestly, it's not as.
I think I watched it like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, right. Well, what I was going to ask, teams try that all the time against the high tempo offense. But what I was going to ask is, if West Virginia's offense clicks and maybe they don't tinker as much as they did and they just let it click, do you foresee Kansas doing that? Are we going to see that again? It doesn't appear Rich Rod's going to do it against Kansas because he was so mad about it in the brawl. I guess you don't have to worry about that on the flip side.
No, and I think Kansas is actually trying to establish itself as kind of a high-tempo team. That's when they were doing some of their best stuff against Mizzou. Was like late in that first quarter. I'm like, usually I think I have a certain amount of time to like check my phone or like do whatever, look around at the crowd, like because I'm shooting the game, and then I look up and like the ball's already snapped, and I'm like, oh, okay, and throw the camera up. I've noticed that Kansas has been playing a little bit faster. I don't think so. I don't think I've ever seen a Lance Leipold ran Kansas team pull that stuff.
Okay.
In an egregious, at least in a manner that's so egregious that I caught on to it on the field.
It was 2 or 3 Pitt players almost every play in the fourth, and certainly going into overtime. Basically, once Nico got back in the game and the offense started to click again, and the reason why they almost blew it was that period when he wasn't in. And I don't think Nico Markell's a world beater or a Big 12 player of the year like some love him, but the offense is clearly different with him in versus him not in. Nobody else really can move the ball. But once he went back in there, it was they were dropping like flies. And Rich Rod's very concerned for the Pitt players, and if they have enough players for the rest of the year, and if the training staff is overworked. And the remarkable thing, though, for the Pitt medical team is these players all were able to finish the game. It was an amazing thing. So
well, I remember maybe you guys saw it because I think it went viral. I think it was like 2 weeks ago. There was one game that I was watching where like one player flopped, and then at the same exact time another player like was about to flop and then goes down and sees that his his buddy already flopped and then like shot back up and was like, "Oh shoot." And we were like, I forget what team it was. It's going to bother
That's
me now,
funny.
but it was
I'll have to look that
egregious.
up.
It was so bad.
Yeah, that's more egregious than what happened in the brawl. The brawl was pretty freaking egregious. We'll maybe that won't happen on either side here, but it'll be funny because it does kind of feel like that these two teams are trying to do the same things on offense. I mean, in all reality, Katie, Jalen Daniels playing for Rich Rod would probably be the dream. He probably is the quarterback that Rich Rod wants. If you went close to Pat White, it's probably Jalen Daniels. It's not Nika Markiel, who not as fast. I'll just say that. So maybe not as fast, not as athletic, but he has won games, and Rich Rod calls him a winner here. You mentioned that you think Kansas is going to win through the air, and Luke talked about what would probably screw this up for the Mountaineers if they don't end up winning. If Kansas doesn't get this victory and it ends up off the rails like it was a season ago, what do you think occurs? Is it as simple as Jalen Daniels throws interceptions like what happened a lot last year? Or is there something else that is still a problem for them that could derail them in this game? Because they are facing a team that now is finding a rhythm. Maybe they would have been better off facing the Mountaineers a week earlier coming off Ohio. They kind of have found a rhythm a little bit here. But if they don't win and WVU wins, what do you think went wrong for the Jayhawks?
I think it would be going back to what I said about the run game. And then, I mean, when you look at the stat sheet from the Mizzou game, I actually said that like live after the game. I was like, actually, the reason why Kansas lost this game is 1,000% in the numbers. Because they outperformed them by an obscene amount in just total like offensive yardage. Like they won time of possession 40-20. Like you only possess the ball for 20 minutes of the game, you're probably not winning the game.
Yeah.
And then the amount of rushing yards, terrible. But it really is. I think it's going to come down to if Kansas does lose, it's because of the same mistakes that they had against Mizzou, which I hope don't plague them this season. I mean, that's your ideal world is that a team that you're a fan of, realizes early in the season what their issues are and are able to tackle it throughout the season. I think that's kind of the point of non-conference play at this point. I'm like, we do non-conference play for two reasons. One, to build fan excitement because you paid some team $3 million to come to your school and lose by 30 points and put butts in seats for the first few conference games. And two, to realize what your issues are and fix them in time for conference play. So it just comes down to, could Kansas fix the issues that were glaring last week? Because defense just allowed too many mistakes and allowed Mizzou to control the game after the first half. Or it really all went wrong when Mizzou got that safety in the second quarter, kind of just spiraled from there. So not letting something like that shake your momentum, because that really was what kind of did it for Kansas. But it was in the stat sheet, and I think if they lose again, it would be because they kept the same habits.
Yeah, and we will see also if West Virginia can force turnovers, because they've been forcing turnovers. They've yet to actually have one be a defensive score, and the offense has had their moments of sluggish play and barely able to move the ball. So there have also been times where West Virginia created a turnover and then didn't capitalize on it, going again back to the Ohio game, but even some to the brawl. If they can keep those turnovers coming and maybe get a defensive score and pop something, that certainly will help West Virginia. We will see if that happens as well. But this is a big test for Zach Alley, the Mountaineers defense. And then it could also be an offensive shootout. It really could be both these two teams just puts points on the board if the Mountaineers offense can keep clicking, or if Kansas can keep figuring it out. And Kansas, I guess, would have had an opportunity if they could have got the Missouri win, if they had to maybe argue for a non-conference champ spot in the playoff if they kept winning all year and said, we got that win. But they didn't, and they can fix their year if they get these conference wins. And we'll see what quality of the win over Pitt ends up being for West Virginia. Do you have a score prediction? Can you give me a score prediction? And you're going to be there covering the game. You already mentioned
I am going to be there.
Win. Yeah,
I'm going to be there. I do think Kansas is going to win, and I'm not here thinking that Kansas is going to win the Big 12 this year. Said that preseason. I mean, they win this game. They got Cincy the week after. Easy game.
Yeah.
One would think. I do think Kansas is going to win. I'm going to say 34-24.
Okay.
That's what I'm going to go with.
Okay.
Yeah,
That I believe is
put it in
over.
writing.
I believe that's over under right now. And I actually do want to ask you before we let you go. I don't know if you saw this. Are you at all surprised on the spread now that I mention it?
What
Kansas
is it
right
right
now.
now?
Kansas right now is favored 13.5 by FanDuel and DraftKings. They opened up the week at 11.5 and 12.5. West Virginia has the same records, coming off a win, just scored over 30 points. I know it's at Kansas, but Kansas actually had a worse year last year, even though the Mountaineers had a rough year. That spread has been really surprising to me. I
I think
shouldn't be
that's a
betting
bit
on the
generous.
games that we're covering, but I feel like it's really tempting, even if Kansas wins.
I
Does that
do think
surprise
that's a
you at
bit
all?
generous. The thing KU does also have going for them is like they got a crazy nice new stadium that they're playing in. I should
I've
say it's
heard that.
75% crazy nice because
Okay.
the east side is still but ugly. That's getting fixed after this season. It's a 2-year, 3-year project.
Okay.
But I mean the fan base has really bought in. Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
I believe this is already a sellout. If it or it's super close if it hasn't been already. I do think that home field advantage does matter in college football.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to
100%.
help.
I agree. That's a really large spread.
I think
It
that's
don't.
too generous. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
It don't.
wouldn't give it a 13.5 spread.
Yeah, and that's what I saw before we hit record here, and that almost lends credence for Rich Rod to have one of those Rich Rod speeches where we just won the brawl and we're a 13.5 dog to a
Yeah.
team that won 5 games last year. Like, this
Yeah.
is a little disrespectful. So we'll see if that motivates anybody. But yeah, Kansas, I do think should be favored. And I will tip my hand, and Luke and I will give our picks maybe after we let Katie go. But I do think Kansas is probably going to get this win. But 13.5, that's a lot. That's a lot. That's a lot of points there. But Katie, I definitely appreciate the time for sure. We'll see if you jinx Kansas this year or not, and what ends up happening in this game. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be down there. Couldn't meet you and hang out down there, but maybe we'll talk again before the year's over and enjoy the new fancy stadium. I hear a lot of nice things about it. Yeah,
It is pretty beautiful. Every seat's a chair back too. So maybe one day if
man.
I ever just go to a game, I'll get to experience that.
Yeah, you almost need to go to a game as a fan to experience this stadium. I think that needs to
Yeah.
happen. Yeah, I think that needs to happen. But Katie Maher of KCTV5, definitely appreciate the time.
Thanks, guys.
Well, again, Katie Maher of KCTV5 joining us here at Mountaineer Report. Luke Blain still with me here, and you can find every episode of Mountaineer Report available everywhere you get your podcasts on YouTube and throughout the WVSN network. So, Luke, either any takeaways from anything Katie had to say or any takeaways from anything that Rich Rod, Zach Alley, any of the players had to say if you heard their commentary from the press conferences this week, whichever way you want to go.
Yeah, to kind of piggyback off of Katie there, I think that, you know, Jalen Daniels at has always been the center of this Kansas team.
Yeah.
And I think the level of his play is either going to uplift Kansas or drag them behind. And of course, like I wasn't as aware of the offensive coordinator situation. I knew they had a couple changes in that arena there last year and coming into this year. So
Yeah,
you
Kotelnicki
you
was
have
there a couple years ago
yeah,
when Daniels had a great year. The coach that was
yes.
rumored and Mountaineers were looking at for a while before Rich Rod, I will say. But so in Jalen Daniels for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think looking at Jalen Daniels, he's such a talented player. I think, like you said, he's a Rich Rod guy. If had he hit the portal, Rich Rod would have sent the house when it comes to NIL for him. But I think looking at what this Kansas offense could be against what the Mountaineer defense is, it's
Yeah.
such an interesting matchup because WVU has gotten it done, rushing the passer, defending the pass. They forced some fumbles. It's been a big year for this Mountaineer defense, and I think the biggest thing right now is I mentioned it to a friend of mine last week is that this year we're actually seeing WVU make adjustments, and that doesn't feel familiar. It's like it's like I was talking to him about it. Because after that Ohio game, I couldn't remember a single time that they rolled Nico out left in the pit game, and that was where he struggled in the Ohio game. They rolled him out to his left. They played to his strengths. They didn't try to kind of force him as a runner. Of course, they, tried that a little bit with Fox and Henderson. But I think if WVU kind of sticks to what works, and I think after 3 games, you have a much better idea of what works than you did going into the game against Robert Morris, I think you're going to be looking a lot better here. So, I mean, if Nico can play a clean game, if they keep the offense at a good tempo, if they win the time of possession, I like WVU here. But Kansas also has a chance to overtake that by doing what works on their side. And I think it's truly going to be a battle of which offense is smoother and commits less mistakes.
Yeah, no, 100%. And again, as Katie was talking about, the issue with Kansas last year was they made too many mistakes, too many turnovers, etc. They actually were able to move the ball. If they can move the ball and keep up what they've been doing so far this year, they even move the ball against Missouri despite losing. And Jalen Daniels does not make the mistakes, does not turn over the football, and kind of plays like he's been so far this year and not like he did a year ago, then this could be a rough day for the Mountaineers and a test for the Mountaineer defense. This Mountaineer defense has been great all year. Even in the loss, they were great. They deserved to win defensively. The offense let them down. But you could argue that Jalen Daniels in this Kansas offense is more of a test than even Pitt, who had yet to really prove themselves. And the Eli Holstein and company really hadn't had the test that West Virginia was for them earlier in the year. Kansas is going in having faced a Power 4 team already in Missouri, so they can fix themselves against the Power 4, whereas Pitt didn't have that going into the brawl. It kind of is that perfect storm, a defense playing great versus an offense playing great. And then the Mountaineers offense is very similar to Kansas's, so we'll see what happens here. To go into somebody else here in the chat, and we got to bring this up, we got to talk about it. It also was a talking point during the press conferences amongst fans and really going to be forever. But now the much anticipated debut of Jamori Robinson is going to happen in Lawrence against the Jayhawks. A lot of people thought it would be in the brawl. He was on the dress roster, but didn't actually play in the game, didn't practice enough, and it didn't end up happening. But he's going to play this week. Now, Rich Rod and Zach Alley, it does seem like they try to kind of downplay his production a little bit by saying maybe 60% of what I'm normally going to give him, I'll give him in this week. He's still an athletic force and still a great pass rusher, but who knows, because it's his first outing. It's a complex defense to learn. We're really multiple. We got a lot of guys. And the weird thing is, Luke, they're getting a great transfer addition to a unit that has already been great. This is not a part of the team that really needs improving, even though he could certainly help them and add more to it. So what are you expecting from Jamori Robinson? What do you think is reasonable to expect from Jamori Robinson? Because we already have somebody here in the chat talking about the defense is going to be scary with him. We've already heard people going into the year thought he was Defensive Player of the Year in the Big 12, and we haven't seen him on the field yet. What do you think is reasonable? What are you expecting? And I guess, could he be a difference maker in this game? Is this almost the perfect game to debut him against a Jalen Daniels type if you have to hold him out? Maybe this is the perfect time to throw him out there against this quarterback?
Yeah, in a game where I think both offenses are going to try to maximize the time of possession and maximize the volume of plays that they get to put out there on the field, you'll have to think that Jamori Robinson will get his opportunities to be out there. I'm not sure if he'll be like starting and playing every down until the end. I'm not sure if that's a realistic expectation, having, he hasn't played anything game speed,
Right.
like a full game speed yet this season. Now, of course, he does have the benefit of playing against WVU's offense in practice, which is about as high tempo as it gets. So this is it, and there are pieces to this Mountaineer defense, a lot of, some different edge rushers they can throw in there. You maybe expect him to be, I don't want to, I guess, in a snap count in a sort of a way, but I know that is mainly reserved for players who are injured. But I think just in terms of getting him accustomed to the speed of the game, especially against a high-powered Kansas defense. I mean, I'm not sure he'll go out there and break the game. Of course, they are playing against, like Katie said, 4 or 5 new offensive line starters out there. So,
Yeah.
It's not like that offensive line has a ton of experience. But Jamori Robinson, I think down the line does have a chance to be a game breaker on defense, given to Zach Alley, who is probably the best defensive coordinator in the Big 12 right now, if not now, probably getting there. And he has found a way to maximize all of the talent on this defensive side of the ball. And you have to think that they have game planned for him to come back. This isn't like a guy just, getting put back out there and you have to find ways to fit him into
Yeah.
the defense. I think you're going to be able to plug and play him to a certain extent. Now, how that works out against a high tempo game where you have a chance to maybe go out there and play against an 11-yard drive and then WVU might score quick or they might have to punt and then go back out there. We'll see. I'm not going to try to downplay. It's not like, you forget how to play after an off season and after missing the first 3 games, but that's just the situation Robinson's dealing with, is going to try to fit back into the flow of the game.
Yeah. He does play a position that you can go in there even after only 1 week of practice, after missing games. Maybe you don't know the whole playbook. It's a complex playbook to learn. I'm sure there's nobody who's been out there every game that knows this whole playbook defensively, but you can get away with it because you're Jamori Robinson. And I'm sure what they're going to tell him is, okay, maybe you don't learn everything. Your goal today, see quarterback, get quarterback.
Yeah.
And I think he can get that done. He is an elite pass rusher. At least he was a UTSA. We'll see if that translates to the Big 12 and the Power 4. I would imagine it's going to, at least at a certain level, or else they wouldn't have brought him in. They are able to judge talent and judge whether or not they can elevate, and we'll see if that continues with Jamori Robinson. They've done it with Ty Edwards. They've done it with other players. They've been able to tell they can elevate and still get it done in the Big 12. And so far, that eye of talent has worked out. And part of maybe what's different about this team and even this era is the eye of talent. Even if you're not getting, tons of Power 4 transfers, the players you are getting to elevate, they can handle it. So your eye of talent is better with Rich Rod and Zach Alley. And then also Zach Alley. I mean, you just said that West Virginia may have the best defensive coordinator in the conference, and it doesn't even sound like a hot take from what we've seen through three weeks. And yet you flip it a year ago. And
I was just about to point that out. Can you imagine saying that last year?
Yeah, let's just say that wasn't the case a year ago. I mean, not to throw shade, but you could argue maybe had the worst defensive coordinator in the conference. That's just what was happening in front of you. The secondary was certainly ranking as the worst in the conference, if not one of the worst in the country. And while the secondary is not the strength of this defense, it's more on the D-line and linebackers. The secondary, even being a weakness, looks way better than a year ago, and at least they're being physical. So, again, Katie brought up that maybe Kansas wins this game throwing the ball because they can't get their run game going, and the Mountaineers are so great against the run. That would be a hard team to get going against. I don't know if it's a guarantee that happens. Maybe they get interceptions or 2. Maybe they can at least make it harder on Daniels, but they haven't faced the mobile quarterback who can also throw as well as Daniels. So we will see what happens and if that does translate or not. Now, you mentioned the quarterback situation, Luke. Are you expecting it to just be the Nico Marchiol show? Because I got to tell you, I am not. I am expecting him to rotate again. This is what he's been saying he's going to do all year. He's been doing it all year. He seemed pretty stubborn, whether it be after the brawl or even on Tuesday. I would be surprised if we don't see a little bit from Fox or Jalen Henderson. What I would like to see, and what I'm keeping my eye on, is who comes in first between the two of them when he's rotating, because we've seen Henderson from Ohio in the Ohio game, and then last week, the last game, Fox came in first. Maybe it means nothing. Rich Rod won't give an answer, but neither one of them impressed at all. Jalen Henderson still can't move the ball, and Scotty Fox had that big run against the FCS, but 2 interceptions on 2 real bad balls that should never have been thrown, let alone right to pit defenders. I'm expecting this to still be a rotation, or at least still see some of them. Are you actually expecting this to be the Nico Marchiol show?
That's what's hard about it, is because I feel like the answer is so clearly that, which is that what should happen is putting Nico in there. I mean, it was night and day. It really was night and day. Sure, he struggled a little bit. He really struggled a little bit in the first half. You were only up 7-3 going into halftime. But it's not like, and listen, I like Scotty Fox as a prospect. I think he has a chance to be very good given another year or 2 here at WVU. Yeah. But you can't look at what it's not like Scotty Fox went out there and was an immediate spark plug that absolutely elevated the team. I mean, the play was a slant. The play that got WVU down inside the 5-yard line was a slant route. So it's like Nico could have absolutely made that throw. And I think you run the risk. I mean, I don't think fans understand just how, I don't want to say lucky Rich Rod got, but maybe how lucky the team as a whole got that you were able to put Nico right back out there and he immediately played his best football. That doesn't always happen. You have to get back into the flow of the game for many quarterbacks. And I know he discussed that a little bit in the post-game
Mhm.
presser, but
Right.
that's just not dice that you want to roll when it comes to the offense. I don't think, especially when it comes to so much of this offense is based on rhythm. It's based on flow of the game. It's based on, taking advantage of the opponent whenever they think they have you figured out, and then all of a sudden you pull a run on the RPO or pass it, whichever. I just can't. I mean, I honestly do think maybe you're right. Maybe it is another rotation situation, which I think would be a bad decision
Maybe
at
at
the end
least
of the
not a
day.
whole quarter, because in the brawl it was basically the third quarter. Maybe
Oh, it
not a
was.
full
It
quarter,
was the
and
third quarter.
yeah, maybe not a full quarter. I do think you still see a little bit, and maybe he'll think it's either a spark or he'll try to catch somebody napping and maybe throw them off because maybe he'll try to do something with Fox with his legs. I would imagine things would be less through the air with Fox based on what we saw against Pitt. Maybe Henderson can finally find some rhythm. I think people do forget that while Henderson has looked just out of sync and not good when in there, this goes from spring to fall camp to even in games. He was a 4-star recruit for a reason. He did get hurt at Texas A&M. And when he was brought in, Luke, to be fair to Rich Rod here, when he was brought in, that was the one move that most fans, even if they were Nico people, were excited about in the sense of this is a power forward transfer QB. Now, that has not worked
Yeah.
in recent memory. Going back to Neil Brown, he brought in power forward transfer QBs. Clearly didn't work out. But it's not like this is trying an FCS kid or a JUCO kid. This is a player that Texas A&M wanted, and we know the
Yep.
money they have. So there's talent there. I almost feel like that maybe the injuries kind of ruined his career because he's never been what he was at in high school ever again, and he still doesn't fully look like he is comfortable there, at least not as a thrower. Maybe on the
Yeah.
ground. Maybe you just try on the ground. Granted, that'll make it easy for the defense to scheme. And to the fan there, I don't expect Max Brown. It's not 100% known on how long he'll be out or how serious the hamstring injury is, but I would not expect Max Brown. He's not even discussed at all. I would be surprised if
Yeah.
we see Max Brown, but I would imagine we're going to see more than just Nico Markiel, for better or worse. And Nico said he expected it going in. Rich Rod said he expected it going in. And when you mention Rich Rod got lucky and you don't want to say Rod got lucky, well, the headline of my takeaways column was Rich Rodriguez got lucky against Pitt. So, yes, Rich Rodriguez got lucky. And imagine the
Yeah.
conversation we'd be having now if Pitt, who took a lead when Nico Markiel was out because West Virginia couldn't answer and couldn't move the ball, if they would have held on, or if Nico Markiel if he never returned to the game, I think we're having a different conversation here. And West
Yeah.
Virginia would have definitely lost and not mounted a comeback. And then the vibes would be what you said before, that you can't lose to Pitt. The emotions would be bad. Yes, Big 12 play matters more, but the fans would be checked out, etc. That would be the conversation now. There's a sigh of relief getting the Pitt win, especially when you don't play them really probably the rest of Rich Rod's time. But if you want to win a Big 12 title or a national title, like Rich Rod's been saying, then you got to win some conference games. So this is still very, very important. Any more thoughts on either this matchup or the conversation this week about the Jayhawks?
Yeah, I keep just going back on the I keep going back to the quarterback thing because
We'll
I
see.
am just trying
We
I
will
am
see.
trying to get like understand the psychology of it, because I think what really is trying to happen is it's hard to get film on three different quarterbacks. It's hard to prepare for
I
three
think
different
he thinks
quarterbacks.
that, right? Yeah.
And I think it's like, I mean, I'm sure that nobody in the NFL has film on whoever's behind Patrick Mahomes, but they're not going to try to catch him off guard and take Mahomes out of the game and put the other guy in. And
That's
I'm not,
true.
Nico Markiel and
Nico
Patrick
Markiel,
Mahomes are
Patrick
not the
Mahomes,
same
a little
player.
different.
They are not the same player. I'm not saying that. But
Right.
like, I think the biggest cardinal sin that like a lot of coaches do is not playing to the strengths of their roster.
Yeah.
We saw it last year. They tried to make Garrett Green a pocket passer, which he wasn't. Last year, apparently, they tried to make Jalen Daniels a passer, which he wasn't.
Yeah.
And now I think they're trying to kind of turn this, like, they tried to make Nico a runner, and that's not his primary play style. And
Yeah.
that's what didn't work against Ohio. It didn't really work against Robert Morris.
It's still
I
Rich
just think
Rod's though. I mean,
it is
I
still
hear
Rich
I
Rod.
hear what you're
Yes.
saying about not making a mobile quarterback a pocket passer, but this is what we talked about in Athens, that I always had the concern that Nico Markio wasn't fast enough to be able to have success in the Rich Rod offense. Now, obviously, they had the fourth quarter, they had the overtime. Yeah, he had a great showing in the FCS game, not so much in Ohio. Obviously, early in the brawl, he shouldn't have been taken out, but the offense was also not moving and clicking that well. And they did have the one score, but they probably should have had more. So I'm still not fully sold on Nico Markio being this elite quarterback that can win you 9, 10 games. He's by far the best option on the roster. There is not a question, unless you can bring somebody in here mid-season, which is not literally going to happen. He is by far the best option, should play the whole game. He's obviously QB1. Luke, the depth chart still says quarterback or. It still says Nico Markio or Jalen Henderson or Scotty Fox. We should be moving on from that. He's clearly the quarterback one. Does
Yeah.
not mean that I think he's even as good as Jalen Daniels or as many other quarterbacks in the conference, which is why I do think this is still probably a 7-win Mountaineer team at ceiling. We'll see if they impress me
Yeah.
more against the Jayhawks and what Nico does. But for the most part, despite, and this is why I asked Rich Rod, what makes him such a winner? Because the stats don't always say that he's playing well, but his teams end up freaking winning. And Rich Rod talks about his moxie, talked about his aggressiveness, talked about his attitude, talked about not getting down. So credit to him for not getting pulled
Yeah.
while leading and not getting down, being a leader, and then going back in there and leading his team to a victory. He is a winner. He has won, and he is by far the quarterback one of this roster. I'm still not sold on him being more than that and being good enough for this team to really get to the promised land or get where the program wants to be and where Rich Rod thinks he can even get there this year. I don't know if Nico's good enough. So that is the issue, that as much as maybe you're right in you play to your quarterback strengths, if you're coordinating for Nico Markio, that Rich Rod is, he's really the offensive coordinator here, then you need to do a lot more passing, a lot more of even short routes, even try to catch somebody over the top. You need to do a lot of that. Maybe RPOs, but let Nico air it out occasionally, a lot more with his arm than his legs. That will be playing to Nico's strengths. And he can be a much more efficient passer than Garrett Green, for example, was. Maybe the ceiling there of efficiency is higher. Nico's proven that. The issue is, and this is why I think there's going to be that rift always that will exist between quarterback and coach, and why I think he'll still get pulled occasionally, and why he still won't be quarterback one on the depth chart ever, is because, I mean, when Rich Rod has had his success, which I do think is going to get him in the College Football Hall of Fame someday, if you look at the resume, it has been with quarterbacks and what they do on the ground. And even Pat White, you got to throw a little bit too. Robinson had to throw a little bit too. It can, Tyler Huff last year, throw a little bit too. It's not just on the ground. But Nico looks like he has ankle weights on sometimes. Like, it does not look like he can really be dynamic on the ground. And I don't think Rich Rod's ever going to do what you're saying of it got to be 70% with his arm. Let him be efficient. Let him kind of manage the game. If we can find an opportunity to scramble, we'll do it. We don't have to worry about 100 yards on the ground. Like Rich Rod always, even talking in the offseason, the bar is 1,000 yards on the ground. And then somebody asked Nico, can you be 1,000-yard rusher? Because coach just said that's what you got to do to be conference player of the year. That I've always, every time he wins a conference title, he has conference player of the year quarterback. You got to have 1,000 yards on the ground. It almost sounds like you're telling me you don't think Nico can do 1,000 yards on the ground, but if he can't, then I think there's never going to be a full maximization of this offense, because I don't think Rich Rod's ever going to fully give in to what you're saying that would fully be the strength of Nico Markio either.
Yeah, that's true. I do want, like, I think that is my main concern, I guess, is like I'm talking about earlier, being so set on having a certain style of play that you want to impose so badly that you kind of sacrifice a certain player's strengths to try to
Yeah.
accomplish it.
Yeah.
And I think you see that at all levels of football. You truly do. It still
Yeah.
happens in the NFL. It happens all the time in college. But, Nico right now, um, Let me see. His right now he has gained, or his net yardage is 61 rushing yards. So, I mean, if that is that much of a deal breaker to Rich Rod, he's going to keep doing this until it doesn't work. And it got extremely, extremely close to not
Yeah.
working into
Yeah.
what a lot of fans consider the most important game of the year.
Yeah.
But he got by with it. So it's hard to, I mean, I wish I can't believe I'm
I
saying
mean,
this,
he's
but
a smart
I
enough
wish I could
coach.
just see into the
Yeah.
mind of Rich Rod. I wish I could see
Oh,
in there just
that's
because I
the scary place, probably.
don't want. Yeah, I know. Like,
Yeah.
be careful what you wish for. But I think because it is truly a coin flip on me what happens in this game. Like in terms of like what I think is going to happen in this game, I think if he leaves Nico out there, I think you have a really good shot to win. But if you start mixing and matching quarterbacks, I just can't get behind thinking WVU can win this game.
Yeah, Luke Blain, Mike Asti here, Mountaineer Report, everywhere you get your podcasts, and of course, made possible by the West Virginia Sports Now Network. I agree. And it's kind of why I don't think they're going to win this game, because I actually think this is the best team they played all year. I do think Kansas has the potential to be better than Pitt. Maybe I'm really high on Kansas. Maybe I've talked to Katie too much on and off the air. I kind of am high on Kansas. I do think they can be a dark horse Big 12 champion. I don't think they're going to go ahead and win and lift the trophy, but I think they could be a dark horse team that contends through November, which is the bar that Rich Rod said. I want to contend through November, at least in year one. I think Kansas could do that this year if they get this win. If they don't, then maybe it's on the board for the Mountaineers, because yeah, they have Cincinnati next, but you can't. It's hard when you're behind the eight ball when you open up Big 12 play. And West Virginia's beginning of conference play is not an easy part of their schedule at all. I mean, Utah won't be easy. BYU's not going to be easy. The schedule isn't easy from now on for the Mountaineers, home or away. So I think Kansas is a very similar team. Luke, maybe there's a little bit of an advantage that Rich Rod can tell Zach Alley, you're basically scheming against my offense. I mean, it almost feels like that Jalen Daniels and Kansas is almost a poor man's version of what he did in his first tenure. They're trying to run all RPO, a little bit of a spread, and then throw it if you find somebody who can make a play. That's what he did with Pat White. So I'm sure he can say, I know how to scheme against this team. They're running my offense in a way. And he's not actually, this is why I joke with Katie that I think he'd rather have Jalen Daniels. They're able to run his offense from when he had his success with Pat White more than he can run it, because I just don't think Nika Markiel can be Jalen Daniels or be Pat White or be near what he needs on the ground in addition through the air. But I think there's going to be a little bit of a shuffle. Maybe he won't make the mistake of doing it again while leading, because he is a great coach. He is a smart coach. He has said that he can learn things even from a win that's a tough win as well as a loss. It did look like, as you mentioned, he made adjustments and learned from the Ohio loss. So I'm sure that he's not stupid. I'm sure he's going to watch the Pitt film and probably say to himself, and behind closed doors, I almost lost that game. I got lucky. I got to fix this, and this. I don't think you're going to see the Novocaine same thing. And, that was kind of the annoyance of the last several years, that you have an issue game and then you go back and it's the same thing again. Rich Rod, to his credit, we've only seen 3 games in this era, but he's changing it up already. He's already willing to make adjustments. So I would imagine we're going to see more of those against Kansas, even from just the issues in the backyard brawl. Now, do you have a pick? Because it sounds like you're kind of split on this game. Katie is picking Kansas. She did pick Kansas a year ago, and Kansas did not win. But this is a different Kansas team. She has Kansas. I believe she had 34-24. Where are you?
I keep thinking back to those last 3 drives for WVU in the brawl. I think it kind of, to me, watching Nico step out there and go 3 for 3 on what WVU needed to win that game, that to me kind of felt like a turning point. That felt like him stepping up and making plays that he'd never really had to make to win WVU football games. I mean, I can't. It was Cincinnati last year where the offense was bad. The year where he came in as a freshman for Pitt and Texas Tech, he threw like probably a combined 15 passes between those 2 games.
It was like 80 yards of offense again in the brawl.
Yeah.
They defense won it. He didn't show anything on offense.
Exactly.
The only game he's shown something is at Arizona, and then this year. Prior to this year was really only at Arizona. The other wins were because of the defense. Yeah.
That really felt like the QB1 stepping in, taking command of the offense, and leading WVU to its potential offensively. I mean, they moved the ball on those 2 drives at the end of the game and then in overtime. So I like to think that maybe Nico Markiel just goes out there and makes it impossible to pick against him. Maybe he goes. I like to think that maybe he goes out this week, slings and slings the
Maybe.
rock
Yeah.
and leads WVU to a win. I kind of like the idea of a shootout in this game. I was thinking
Okay.
about it. Last year I always said before the season started that the Kansas game for WVU was going to be the most exciting game of the year.
Okay.
And maybe for fans it didn't, but
It was exciting.
I
Ryan
mean,
Gallagher game winning
it
score.
was exciting.
Yeah.
I'm an exciting in terms of volume of
Yeah.
offense,
Yeah.
offensive plays. That kind of ended up being a defensive game down the stretch, and then combined with the rain delay when WVU was losing, that was a real damper on all the fun for everybody. But I
Right.
think that this year's game, has a chance to be what I expected last year, where you have Jalen Daniels, who's kind of off the leash in terms of trying to be molded into a pocket passer. WVU, as much as I kind of throw my hands up in the air watching the WVU offense this year, it is much more fluid and has a much better flow
Yeah.
to it than last year did. I kind of like to think that WVU kind of edges its way out in a shootout.
Okay.
So for this week, I'm going to pick a WVU win 35-31.
Okay.
That's where I'm going to go.
Okay. I'm going to stick to my guns here, and it's kind of funny because I believe from our brawl preview that we were flipped in that preview as well in terms of the predictions.
Yeah.
But I've always felt like this is going to be a loss. I think even when we did this before the season months ago, I thought it was a swing game. But now watching these teams, Kansas having the 2 weeks to prepare, being at home, I think this is part of why the spread is what it is, even though I do think it's unfair. And I don't think anyone's winning this game by 2 touchdowns. So I think maybe this pick WVU on the under. But I am going to pick the Mountaineers to lose this. I know the brawl was a big win, but you got to win the conference games, and 0-1 in conference play will matter a whole lot more really for the year than being 2-2 or going 2-1 in out of conference play. And that is kind of what I think will occur. I think this will be a shootout. I do think they're still going to get some turnovers. They got to capitalize and score off those turnovers, though. They can't let them be nothing like they've been at times the last couple weeks. I think Kansas is going to win this game 34. I'm going to keep around the same number you and Katie had. I'm going to go 34 27 maybe. Kansas. So same neighborhood for all three of us. Maybe 26. Depends on, field goal or touchdown. I'm going to say that West Virginia's offense is going to have their issues at times, maybe more so than Kansas. Jalen Daniels is not going to make the mistakes and the turnovers and throw the interceptions that he did a year ago. He's playing more in sync and more in tune with his offense than he was a year ago. Now he's getting the plays that really make sense for him more so than a year ago, as Katie brought up. And while they haven't been able to get the run game going, I do think maybe he can do it through the air, and Jalen Daniels himself can cause them fits by running on the ground. So he's going to exhaust the Mountaineer defense as well. He's going to be doing a lot more running than Eli Holstein or Parker Navarro were doing. And if you remember from the Ohio game, when Parker Navarro would scramble out, they didn't really have an answer for it, even though they only scored the 17 points. Ohio should have had a lot more if it wasn't for his interceptions and his turnovers. If Daniels calms that down, then it could have been like Ohio. Ohio probably should have scored 30 points if you take away the interceptions. If Jalen Daniels takes away the turnovers, then they probably are getting over 30. So I'm going to say Kansas wins this game. They hang 34 points. The Mountaineers go 0-1 in conference play. If West Virginia is going to win this game, though, they're going to need to take care of the football, stick with Nico Markiel. They're going to need to maybe take shots at big plays earlier in games. And defensively, they're going to, as they've been, they probably will. They're going to need to force turnovers and finally capitalize and maybe even get a defensive score. I said they need a defensive score to beat Pitt. They beat Pitt without one, even though they got turnovers. It feels like they can't keep doing this where they're getting turnovers and then not capitalizing and maybe giving the offense short field that only results in a field goal or not getting a defensive score. I know there's luck involved to turn those turnovers into defensive scores, but it feels like for this team to really have a special year, they got to start happening. And this is that true test because Kansas is such an equal opponent for me, and they are at home. But
yeah,
it could go either way. I would not be surprised with either result. You could even argue now that West Virginia, even though there's pressure to win in conference play, you could even argue now that Kansas is at home that maybe there's more pressure on them going into this game because they lost their rivalry game. This is kind of the end of the line for Jalen Daniels. You got to figure it out eventually. You can't just be all the talent in the world and never really cash in with a special year. This is the year he has to start winning. So they can't lose this one and expect to start winning and clip off W's and win in conference play, especially when they're at home. And I mean, you really want to have Vegas hate you. The Mountaineers had a 7.5-point spread against them going into the brawl, and they won the game. They are now at 13.5 as we're speaking here on Wednesday going into the week 4 outing, week 1 of conference play against Kansas on the road. If they can win that game or really even cover the spread, then odds makers, maybe they need a new evaluation of how they treat the Mountaineers here moving forward. But that spread is really, really wild to me. Luke Blain, Mike Asti here. Also, thanks to Katie Maher of KCTV5 for joining us. As that'll do it for this edition of Mountaineer Report. You can find us everywhere you get your podcasts. And I would like to see more of the 9 offensive linemen, by the way, Curtis. We also see that in the chat. I do think we're going to see more of that. More 9 offensive linemen, more meat. It'll ignite Ty Edwards again. I think from what Rich Rod was saying, we're going to see more of that. Luke, do you want more of that?
I absolutely. I was truly blessed as a Titans fan because I did get to watch what might be the last of just like ground and pound, run it down your throat
Yeah,
football.
made the playoffs
And
doing that. Yeah.
yeah, they did. Made it to the AFC Championship
Yeah,
doing that.
right.
Don't ask me what happened there. And
Yeah.
but it's like it was also fun watching that the past couple of years at WVU because it kind of felt like they still had a little bit of that.
Yeah.
But man, to see WVU get on the goal line and trot 9 offensive linemen out there is a thing of beauty. That's something else.
Yeah, and as Grayson Barnes said it's a lot of meat. So West Virginia bring the meat to Lawrence. I imagine they will. You will see more of the 9 offensive linemen. Which team can minimize the mistakes and maximize the points? It's easy. That's simple. That's going to result in the victory, and that's going to tell you who's going to be 1-0 in conference play, which is really what matters here. Kansas lost the rivalry game, but they want to be 1-0 in conference play. The Mountaineers won the rivalry game and out of conference play, but being 1-0 in conference play would actually matter more to this story and to this season. Again, Luke Blain, Mike Asti, Katie Maher of KCTV5, Mountaineer Report, everywhere you get your podcasts, and follow our coverage all week long at West Virginia Sports Now.